Okay, so we've given it a few days. I was honestly surprised at the ease of the concession of the race. I think, in a way, though, she was probably relieved. I've heard all the excuses, looked at the meltdowns, all the other things they're showing people. Questions arise on both sides. Wow, what happened to the other 20 million people? Actually, 18 million to be specific. What happened to them? Oh, I don't know, man. Are we allowed to talk about that? Are we allowed to ask about that? Personal opinion, yes, we should be. I mean, we have the freedom to talk about it openly, but when it comes to content online, you're not allowed. The algorithms won't let you. And that's a problem, isn't it? Right now, it's still one-sided on the control. We're going to see if these people leave the White House in the weird, paranoid shambles that the previous administration left to Trump in 2016. They did him dirty. A lot of people were watching it at the time going, yeah, get him, that little fucker. But we are talking about the presidency of the United States of America. Right now, probably still, by just a scotch, the most powerful superpower in the world. And to really do anything, like in Dragon Ball, you got to have like a 1.25 or more of a percentage. You have to be 125% if you're going to obliterate somebody with your ki. And the only way to do that is by fusion at this point of Russia and China. But that's not actually going to happen. I've been watching more than just the election. In my town, there's a union plant that's been going on some iffy schedules. A lot of 2 down, 2 on, like weeks. So like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And like the day after the election was the day that the foreign owners of this company, of this plant, chose to announce to their people that they would be closing this plant in a year and a half. Schedules are probably going to get even more scarce. It's going to get down to a skeleton crew. They're already barely putting anything out. I don't know the reason that they're not putting anything out, whether this is a union stall tactic or what the deal is. So this has been going on locally, and it's not Trump's fault. I think it's their thought on how they're acquiring their metals to build backhoes, and the tariffs may affect that. I think the reason these people have the issue is that because they are from a country where it is cheaper to source the labor to America than to do it in Italy. And they've been working at getting some of the union out from under this anyway through some other factory locations in town that do other work. And at this time, the unions don't have the standing to do anything about it, I don't think. And it's a serious deal. There's a lot of people that work there. And probably, which this is not my idea, somebody I work with had mentioned this a year ago. Probably what will happen is after it gets closed, it will then reopen as a non-union facility doing the exact same thing. Starting wages at probably 10, and experience, meaning you used to make a hell of a lot more than that as a union person, at like 15. None of the protections of a union. That's what's going to happen there. I've seen that happening. I've seen North Korean soldiers going through Russia to fight in Ukraine, and that in Ukraine they have an enormous window of desertion and propaganda for the North Koreans. And the truth is, the North Korean military is probably being better fed by Russia right now than they have been the entire time in North Korea, because it's really, really bad there for the people that live there. That's why you don't want a totalitarian one party. And even in that case, what's set up in North Korea, Kim is a prisoner too. He can't change anything, or the army is ordered to execute him. This whole thing means people from North Korea may, depending on if they have family or not, the ones that don't have family are probably just going to walk straight across the battlefield, high-five the Ukrainians, and fucking keep walking. Because normally they have to find their way in other ways. It's very difficult, and if they make their way into China, they get forced into slavery, organ harvesting, all kinds of bad stuff. Taking these guys and running them through instead, Russia puts itself slightly against China, which is fine. Because if the people in our government are a little more friendly toward Russia, then that thing I talked about 6 months, 9 months, a year ago, something like, on a couple of occasions, if you've been watching, it would be better if US and Russia teamed up. Or even just that US and Russia were not at odds, because that makes it more difficult for China to be at odds with the US. But it's possible that a major restructuring of the global balance of power is nonetheless going to occur, which means there's going to be like lifestyle changes. And what I mean by that is by necessity of the availability of things. And I'm not saying that, this matches up with the tariffs, or, this correlation does not equal causation. But there's going to be a lot of different things in play that are going to kind of, I think we're poised to find some prosperity. At the same time, there may come a little hardship first. And something's going to end up having to crack, where in order to, other countries in the world, I think, are going to be able to put pressure on China to improve its everything, to abandon communism and start electing real leaders. The problem is that everyone in their country is trying to keep their head down, not get in trouble. Everything's collapsing and failing. Their system, it's something like it's set up like there's a requirement to like self-congratulate the party at all times. And so even when bad decisions are made, you just don't acknowledge that a bad decision was made. And so bad decisions keep being made and they pile up. And that's where you have all these weird buildings falling apart, cars made of paper, diseases, smog, inhalation, brain damage, birth defects, all kinds of stuff. Absolute and total lack of personal liberty. And some really weird stuff where, according to the rules, like if somebody else is injured and falls down or something, if you help them, you accept all financial responsibility, because even though they're communists, they still use money. you're responsible financially for their well-being if you help them. And so if you touch them, you also have to fall down, and maybe somebody else will touch you and it'll go on to them. Because otherwise, you just have to ignore them. It's really messed up. And the only reason China really wants North Korea to be doing what it is where it is that gives them a buffer state to proxy against Korea and therefore the West. But if for some reason North Korea ended up not doing what it's doing anymore, freeing its people or whatever, if that was to come about, I think that would, maybe that couldn't happen until like actual representative government in China over communism. But I feel like that's what's going to end up happening, something along that line. And I think what it's going to affect here is there's going to have to be a paradigm shift, a change in the way people think about how they do things in a few ways to better localize resources and products and services and whatnot. Because not that we're going to be isolated from the world or anything, but that there are going to be incentives for companies to do business here. And in doing so, they provide, employment and people have jobs and all kinds of other stuff. But some of that is going to be like semiconductors and microprocessors. Well, I shouldn't say semiconductors. We already do those. Microprocessors like Taiwan. China's probably going to get Taiwan. I don't know if we're going to, how it's going to go there, if there's going to be a war over it. But Taiwan is where almost all the microprocessors are made. If we bring that here, there will be other changes in the culture here because there's other things we can make with that kind of thing too. And once we're making our own microprocessors, the cost of all computing devices will drop. I think that also means the ability to make bigger and more powerful things. That could even be the watershed moment, the singularity of processing power versus human brains. Or, just because we'll be able to improve processing power. Another interesting side note is that the same kind of minerals that are mined in China, done in those nasty, terrible, horrible Foxconn factories and whatnot, those minerals and elements and things also are abundant everywhere under North Korea. So if they were to open up and also mine, they would be able to source a lot of material in a way that's a lot harder to get at than an island like Taiwan is. So I think a technological industrial revolution is near. Maybe beyond industrial, just technological. Something new is coming. Hopefully it's not some bullshit. So, per my previous prediction, I was waiting to see. It looks like there is a little bit. But I think what needs to happen is the opportunity to look into that other one that we're not supposed to talk about. Because, really the question that anyone would be asking is, how in the hell did they go from doing bah to begin with? That's wild and all, but shouldn't we be able to look into something that's an anomaly? We should be able to investigate the anomaly. And instead on this one, they're like, well, the difference from the last one to this one is the anomaly. And it's like, well, technically in a way it is, yeah, because where did they go? The real question is, were they real to begin with? And also you notice that the other side's numbers were lower. I think it's possible that the process of defrauding the electoral system could have been also used by padding the opponent as well to make it a little more realistic. If you take all of those things out, if you can figure out what the ratio is, you can eliminate a very large number out of account and have a little better look. And it's like, wouldn't it be nice to at least be able to say, well, okay, absent all tomfoolery, absent all shenanigans, fully audited, this is the correct result. This is what people voted on, not what somebody fudging something somewhere wanted to happen. And see what that says. We should be able to find that out. We should be able to know. And we should be able to do the same thing on this one. I would not personally be surprised to find out that somebody had, in fact, really fortified Trump on it with the express purpose of, once they get to investigating the election, see that and accuse him of it, even if it wasn't him. But I also happen to know that a shitload of people more voted, which means a lot of the number of votes total is a lot more accurate. A lot more people voted. I know people that never voted that voted. But when such a vicious contest occurs as what we just witnessed, and the level from trying to just dredge up the previous entirety of his first term of what they said about him, and to throw all that crap out there again. This guy's worse than Hitler. Get him, get him, get him. For all of that to just have it be like, oh, okay, guess we lost, walking away. I mean, it's a trap. I suppose they just give up and quit, but I don't think they just give up and quit. So I'm still on a wait and see kind of thing. Also, everyone's favorite BBL representative from the Bronx issued a call to action in a thinly veiled and mostly vague way on a video on her X. So the thing is, most of the previous presidential elections certainly have been certified prematurely for decades. I've been paying attention. I've been watching. I've been voting since 2000. I turned 18 in 1998. I've been voting since 2000. I pay attention. It always takes a couple of weeks to get the counts done, to make sure everything's in line. And that is the time during which the observers are the most important. But a lot of the time, the governors of the states, per a law issued by the legislature, from my understanding, certify the results. Oh, that's who won. You can stop counting. And a final count is never done. Now, you can argue statistics and whatever, and I get that. But usually, most of the counts on those ballots end up taking, for congressional and presidential races, can take weeks. They have to cure a lot of ballots. They really do. People make a mistake, something gets done, they have to send it out, question it, look at it. Is there a way to interpret what they meant? Do we have to contact the person before deciding? There are also people who take that process and utterly subvert it. It's been proven. People should be able to question that. They should be allowed to ask about that. There's nothing whatsoever wrong. If you care about democracy, there's nothing whatsoever wrong with asking questions about the voting process and about the actual results. The fact that we have people saying, oh, I felt threatened because they asked me a question or whatever, that they use it as an excuse to make people stop. There are people that they find doing things. Right now, the AI that we have publicly available to interact with, to query and make requests and have results given specific to what we want, is not able to think for itself, often produces some interesting results before finally understanding through fine-tuning of a query what you mean. And they're terrible with numbers for some reason. Mostly, I think, because they're verbal. They're all like, chat based. But I would love for all results to be fed in, audited by a completely objective, artificially intelligent sorter to actually count the vote. But it would have to be so untainted. And that's the whole problem we've had with machines, is that there are people messing with the machines. There needs to be a perfectly open, visible to all process by which it is certified, it checks itself, and demonstrates that it has no bias or whatever, and then goes through everything, and then also would be able to automatically detect for what's a safe word to use, goofed votes. It would be able to detect people attempting to manipulate the system or to game the system in illegal ways. The current level of AI that we have should be capable of doing that. Should be capable of also taking things like the entire body of the United States Code and proofing it against the Constitution, as well as precedent, as well as proofing precedent against the Constitution. It would be really interesting to see what the result of that is. Even if it had no ramifications, it would be very fascinating to see how much of the law is actually unconstitutional. And if there's a way for it to solve it into something more elegant and simple. That would be the law, not the Constitution. All right, so I think I'm done with this. Keep watching what's going on. But if anybody wants to talk about thinking that they think this election was not clean and fair and transparent and free or whatever, make sure that they know that your eyebrow is like up. While you say, well, you can try all the things that they tried. Those were the legal avenues. You probably get arrested at this point these days, because the government is still the same government that was doing it before. We have a lot of work to do to make the country a better one, and we have a lot of work to do to make the world a better place. But most of it, I think, has to do with getting rid of the cancer of corruption at every level in every type of government. That has got to be excised. Maybe we'll get to see that. I'm hopeful we might get to see that. Everybody have a good night.